In our last segment, we talked about groups of words working together to do one thing, either to work as an adjective or an adverb in the examples we saw. There are ways to recognize groups of words acting together. The most basic group of words that acts together and the easiest to recognize is something called a prepositional phrase. The reason that's the easiest group of words to recognize is that it follows a fairly strict formula. A prepositional phrase begins with something called a preposition, and it goes to the next noun. On the board over there, we have a list of common prepositions. Again, you can find this on the web in hundreds of places. You can find it in any grammar textbook. But just so that you're familiar with them, most of them, or many of them, give location. So you have words like around, at, under, between, beneath. They give location. But there are some that don't give location. The ones I would point you to that are slightly confusing among the prepositions are during, just because it has that ing and it tends to sound a little bit like a participle or a participle verb. For, because it doesn't give location. Of, for the same reason, it doesn't give location. But the one I would caution you most about when we're talking about prepositions is to. And again, I know you still don't know why we're talking about prepositions. We'll get to that in a minute. The word to is a little bit confusing because it can also be part of a verb. So that to speak, to hear, to see, to live, all of these are something called infinitive verbs in English. If you see the word to and you look right after it and you have a verb, then to is part of an infinitive verb. If you see anything else besides a verb after to, then that means that to is going to be part of a prepositional phrase. Now, the formula for a prepositional phrase is from the preposition to the next noun. So here are some examples of prepositional phrases. On the desk, in the forest, for Susie, Susie is our camera person, of spectators, during the summer. All of these are prepositional phrases. They go from the preposition to the next noun. You notice it wouldn't matter if I added words, you'd still just have one prepositional phrase. I could say, in the dark, scary forest. The prepositional phrase would start with in and it would go to the next noun, forest. Prepositional phrases, when they are by themselves like this, are just prepositional phrases. But when we put them in a sentence, they become something. We call them by what they are doing. In the forest is just a prepositional phrase on the blackboard. But if I have the wolf in the forest howled, in the forest is no longer just a prepositional phrase. We call things in grammar by what they are doing. In the forest on the blackboard, just a prepositional phrase. But in this sentence, it's describing wolf, which is a noun. So in the forest is now an adjective phrase. An adjective describes a noun. On the other hand, if I have this sentence, the wolf howled in the forest in this sentence is describing where the howling took place. So in the forest in this sentence would be an adverbial phrase. Here in the forest tells you which wolf. Here in the forest tells you where the howling took place. This is an adjective phrase. This is an adverbial phrase. Now I said to you earlier that adjectives don't move. This looks like a case where an adjective is moving. In the forest is an adjective phrase describing wolf. However, when I switch in the forest to here, I'm changing the meaning of the sentence slightly. When I said that adjectives don't move, I mean it can't move without changing the meaning of the sentence. This tells you which wolf. If I move it anywhere else, it's no longer going to tell you which wolf. It's no longer going to be an adjective. It's going to become an adverb. It'd be the same thing if I moved it at the beginning. In the forest, comma, the wolf howled. Prepositional phrases are going to be either adjective phrases or adverbial phrases when they are in sentences. Now, that tells us something important when looking for the subject and verb. And you can reason this out. The subject and verb of a sentence are always going to be a noun and a verb. That's the way subject and verbs work. Subject's going to be a noun, verb is obviously going to be a verb. Prepositional phrases, when you find them in a sentence, can only be either an adjective phrase or an adverb phrase. Prepositional phrases, to put it another way, are going to be part of the supporting cast of the sentence. They're never going to be the stars of the sentence. What that means in terms of analyzing sentences is that if you have a sentence with a whole bunch of prepositional phrases in it, you can cross out the prepositional phrases and use that trick to narrow down your search for the subject and the verb. In this sentence, if I didn't automatically know that wolf was the subject, if I were tempted to say that forest was the subject, I could look at how the sentence is constructed and say, wait a minute, forest is in a prepositional phrase. I can cross that out. That can't be the subject or verb. It can't be anywhere in there. The subject is wolf. The verb is howled. For this sentence, you probably don't need the trick. But consider this sentence. One of my friends is tall. If I ask you the subject of this sentence, it's going to be really tempting to say that the subject is friends. But we know the subject cannot be friends, because if the subject were friends, the verb would have to agree with it, and the verb would have to be are. You can't say friends is. On the other hand, knowing and understanding what prepositional phrases do in a sentence, the fact that they have to be either an adjective or an adverb in a sentence, tells us we can cross out prepositional phrases when we look for the subject. In this case, you can cross out of my friends from the preposition to the next noun. That leaves us as the stars of the sentence, one is tall. We wouldn't know one what, but the subject of the sentence, the noun, the core of the subject is one. The verb is. One is tall. Of my friends is an adjective phrase telling us about the subject, the noun one. This is the core of the sentence, one is tall. Now, if somebody asked you what's the subject of this sentence and you answered one of my friends, I would accept that as a right answer because you're giving me the subject, the proper subject, the noun, and an adjective attached to it. But the core of that subject is the word one. It's not friends. If I said the large crowd cheered loudly and you said the whole subject is the large crowd, fine. But the core of that subject is not the adjective large, it's the noun crowd. Likewise, one of my friends could be the subject of this sentence, but one is the core of this subject. This is an adjective phrase describing one.